I work support on an Antarctic balloon mission, and we saw something that should not exist. I've never posted about this before anywhere, and I'm not sure I'd call it a whistleblower situation. No one threatened me, no one told me to shut up, but I've kept it to myself for a very long time. I didn't know what to make of it. I still don't, really. I'm not a physicist or anything like that. I was just a contractor. I handled network and RF systems for a high-altitude balloon array deployed in Antarctica. My job was mostly boring, mostly technical, and mostly forgettable, until it wasn't. This was around the early 2010s. I won't say the exact year or project name, but if you know, you know. I am sure there is enough spatterings of information online for you to be able to place some of the details together. It was a NASA-affiliated operation, a balloon-borne radio detection system intended to catch ultra-high-energy neutrinos. These are the particles that pass through you and me by the billions every second, but we don't notice because they barely interact with matter. That's kind of the whole point of the project. The balloon flies high above the continent, listening for brief radio pulses that indicate a neutrino has smacked into ice and produced a cascade of particles. There's a lot of gear involved. The balloon is enormous, the payload is heavy, and the antennas have to be precisely calibrated. Most of the work happens before and after the flight. You prep the equipment, monitor the launch, receive and route data, and eventually retrieve the payload. A lot of it is just sitting in a cramped station, drinking bad coffee, and staring at monitors. If you're lucky, you might get to rest for a few minutes, but don't count on it. I wasn't stationed on the balloon itself, obviously. No one is. It's unmanned. But I was part of the team receiving and analyzing the telemetry as it came down, bouncing between the balloon and ground stations at McMurdo. Our group had a few permanent NASA and university folks, plus a rotating cast of support contractors. I came in from a civilian aerospace firm on a winter contract. I had done similar work with stratospheric comms arrays over Greenland and the Aleutians, but this was my first trip to the South Pole. Things went smoothly at first. The launch was uneventful, which is rare. The balloon achieved proper altitude, and we started pulling in clean data. Most of the recorded events were exactly what we expected. Bursts corresponding to cosmic rays, surface reflections, and the occasional, maybe, probably neutrino. I say maybe because part of the challenge is separating noise from signal. There is a whole side of the operation dedicated to filtering out thermal noise, man-made interference, and weird reflections off the surface. The first anomaly came on day 5 of the flight. I was working a swing shift when one of our analysis flags tripped. These are automated systems that tag interesting events, usually just false positives from solar activity or reflections off of ice ridges. But this one did not match anything we had in the database. It was a sharp, clean impulse. Duration was just a few microseconds, but it was strong, much stronger than what you would expect from a standard neutrino interaction, and it was coming from below. Not from the horizon, not from the sky, but from roughly 30 degrees beneath the horizontal plane. We all stared at the angle for a few seconds. Then someone laughed and said it must be a data inversion. That happens sometimes when the orientation data does not sync right with the event timestamp. But when we checked the metadata, everything lined up. Orientation, GPS, timecode, all clean. We ran it through the classifier again. Same result. Unexplained event, upward impulse, subsurface origin. Now, this is where I expected the science team to get excited, but instead, they got quiet. One of the postdocs, a guy named Eric, made a joke about the signal coming from the hollow earth, and no one laughed. The lead physicist, Dr. K, asked us not to circulate the log outside the internal channel. That wasn't unusual. There's a lot of preliminary data that never sees the light of day. Still, it felt different this time. The next couple of days were uneventful. The balloon held altitude, and we logged the usual mix of background events and noise. But then it happened again. Almost the same angle, same strength, same duration, upward impulse, origin beneath the ice. Now, people started to talk, but in a sideways kind of way. Not formally, not in reports. Just little comments at the coffee pot. Maybe we got a glitch in the phase inversion matrix. Could be some kind of backscatter. Maybe there's an ice layer doing weird things. But the truth was, nobody had a solid explanation. Not even Dr. K, who was one of the most conservative scientists I've ever worked with. He didn't speculate though, obviously. He didn't say anything stupid or make stupid jokes about aliens or new physics. He just said, that signal path is not supported by the standard model. The standard model, for those who don't know, is the physics Bible. It explains how subatomic particles interact, and according to it, a high-energy neutrino coming from that direction should have been absorbed long before it ever reached the ice, let alone produced a detectable event. It would have had to travel through thousands of kilometers of solid Earth and still have enough energy left to interact, which is supposed to be impossible. After the second event, things got more locked down. The analysis software was updated remotely, which is rare. Normally we manage our own patches on site, but this one came from a lab in the States and overwrote some of the custom filters we had been using. Mike, the RF technician who originally flagged the event, asked about it in the main Slack channel and did not get a reply. A day later, he got pulled into a video call and we did not see him again for the rest of the rotation. His gear was packed up by someone else. Now, before you jump to conclusions, I'm not saying it was a cover-up. Maybe they just reassigned him. These things do happen, and they have happened before, but this felt abrupt, like way too abrupt, and the timing felt off. And I just really want to reiterate, this had never happened before in this way. By the end of the deployment, we'd logged 2 more similar events, not as strong, but same profile, same impossible angle. All were quietly tagged anomalous, bundled into a compressed archive, and shipped off with the rest of the mission data. As far as I know, none of it was published, at least not in the way that we recorded it. That is where my direct experience ends. The balloon came down, the payload was recovered, we were debriefed, thanked, and flown back to Christchurch. I finished my contract, signed an NDA like always, and moved on to another project in the southwest. But I never stopped thinking about those signals. And what bothered me wasn't just that they didn't fit the model. It was how fast everyone wanted to move on. Like it was easier to pretend it hadn't happened than to ask what it meant. I didn't think much more about it after I left. Not right away, at least. Like most people who do seasonal contract work, you shift gears and kind of move on. New job, new site, new routine. I went back to working in telemetry systems for a low Earth orbit CubeSat project out in Arizona. Nice weather, terrible coffee. My focus was there for a while. But maybe 3 or 4 months after I got back, I got an email. It wasn't from anyone I worked with directly in Antarctica. It was from a physics grad student I met during orientation. I'll just call him Jay for the purposes of the story. He hadn't been on site during the main flight, but had access to the data from back in the States. The message was short and informal, and honestly, it kinda sketched me out seeing it. You keep in contact with people sometimes if you spent a while working with them, but mostly, people just move on with their lives. You do the whole polite, yeah, of course I'll keep in contact, and we'll arrange to meet up rigmarole, but no one ever actually goes through with it. The message was something like, hey, did you guys see anything weird in Flight 3 logs? We're missing the 1420 batch, and the rest is strange. I replied, and told him we had seen a few things that didn't match expected neutrino patterns, but that the full dataset had been uploaded to the NSF servers. He said they had only been given partial access, and that certain flagged anomalies were locked behind a PI-only firewall, principal investigator level. That was really weird because normally, grad students can at least see the full event set, even if they can't manipulate or publish it. We traded a few more emails, and then he stopped responding. A week later, his university research page was offline. I tried to find him through some of the Slack archives, but he was not listed in any of the project subchannels anymore. I figured he'd either been booted off of the project or switched departments. People wash out of research tracks all the time. Still, it sat in the back of my head like a splinter. A month or 2 later, another guy from my Antarctica rotation, Tony, an RF tech with NOAA background, called me out of nowhere. He wasn't someone I kept in touch with either, but I remembered him because he always wore this worn-out navy beanie, even indoors. He was agitated, said he just had to ask something. Asked if I remembered the events on days 5 and 9, the anomalies. I told him yeah, I remembered. He asked if I'd been contacted by anyone about them. I said no, just a random grad student once. Then I asked what he was asking. He went quiet, then said this. Mike is dead. Car accident, officially. but there is no record of it. No obituary, no funeral notice, nothing. Mike was the technician who flagged the first anomaly and got pulled from the rest of the rotation. Tony said he tried to track him down afterward, even called his old company. They said Mike had left on medical leave and never came back. No one knew where he had gone. Eventually the phone number stopped working. That alone wasn't enough to mean something bad had happened, but now Tony was saying he'd heard from someone else that Mike was no longer with the project and not to be contacted. I asked Tony what he thought it meant. He didn't say cover-up, he didn't say black project or men in suits. What he said was this: something is under the ice that we don't have a box for, and maybe somebody has already opened it. We did not talk again after that. I tried texting him a few weeks later just to check in. No response. I gave up. Figured he was maybe too upset about what happened to Mike. I think they got pretty close while we were working on the project. What started bothering me more and more wasn't just the data. It was the behavior. Silence from people who were once curious and open. It didn't feel like science anymore. It felt like someone had turned off the lights and told everyone to go home quietly. I kept a local copy of the raw logs from the flight, not the full telemetry, but the summary output files that we used for QA during live monitoring. I checked them again last year out of curiosity. At first everything was as I remembered: event timestamps, signal amplitudes, angles of incidence. But I found something else, something I had not noticed at the time. Each of the anomalous signals, the upward impulses from beneath the ice, had a secondary harmonic, a tiny echo a fraction of a microsecond later embedded in the signal. At first I thought it was just digital noise, but it was consistent across all 4 events. And here is the weird part: the echo was not random, it was structured, low frequency, repeating. I had to run a few transforms to clean it up, but it looked almost patterned, like a pulse train. Not information exactly, not language or anything like that, but it did not look natural. I shared it with a friend of mine who works in microwave spectroscopy just as a curiosity. I didn't tell him where it was from. He said it reminded him of ground-penetrating radar returns, the kind you get from dense layered materials, rock, metal, ice, but this signal was too sharp, too focused. He asked me where I got it. I lied and said it was from an old upper atmosphere test. That is when I stopped sharing it. Because here is the thing. When we first picked up those signals, the assumption was that something passed through the Earth, something that should not be able to. But what if we were looking at it backward? What if it didn't pass through anything? What if it came out? I know how that sounds. I am not making a claim, I'm not selling a book or pushing a theory. I am telling you what I saw, what I was part of. It may have a rational explanation. Maybe there's a new kind of interaction no one has modeled yet. Maybe eyes can do things to radio waves that we still don't understand. But when you see people vanish from research roles, when you watch institutions that pride themselves on transparency suddenly go quiet, when you find signals that don't make sense in logs you were never supposed to keep, you start to wonder. Not about aliens or secret governments, not about anything cinematic. You just start to wonder what kind of mistake we made down there. You start to wonder what could possibly be under the ice and make that kind of signal. I mean, shit. Think about how much of the ocean is unexplored, about how much we don't know about our own planet. Maybe there is even more that we don't know that we don't know. Again, I'm not asking you to believe me. I know how this sounds, but do yourself a favor and read this article for me. Draw your own conclusions on what I have said. Just remember, this is what they are comfortable sharing with the general public. Hey, I hope you've enjoyed the story so far. If you do and you want to hear more, please leave a like and subscribe to my channel, and leave a comment down below, as it lets the algorithm know that you like my content and it promotes it to more people. My goal for the channel is to hit 50,000 subscribers, and we're closing in fast, so thank you, and back to the stories. All of these stories take place in the same general area. The first incident I can clearly remember happened when I was 4 or 5. After speaking to others in the area, I learned that the events I experienced were far from the only things to have ever happened in the area, but I digress. I will get to the experiences others told me after I have relayed my own, if there is sufficient demand. It was a typical summer night, and I was settling down to watch Snake. Kudos to those of you who know what I'm talking about. My dad was doing some work outside, and my mom was in the kitchen cleaning up from the dinner we'd all just finished eating when my dad came in, pale as a sheet. My mom asked him what was wrong, and he replied, "I heard something outside. Get me my gun." My mother, of course, complied. With the gun secretly in hand, my dad went back outside, and my mother, my brother, and I watched him from the doorway. Then we heard it too. It sounded like a woman screaming or something. I know that a lot of animals sound that way, but I've lived in the country my whole life and never heard that sound before. The closest I've come to is some videos of big cats, but that raises the question of what a big cat would be doing in the middle of Indiana. My dad paused for a second when he heard it again, but not wanting to look like a pussy in front of his wife and kids, he proceeded to the section of the field next to our house where the sound seemed to be originating from, his pistol held ready. Now, it's important to note that when this happened, there was no house in the field next to ours. A house was built there later, but it was pure country darkness at that time. My dad vanished into the gloom where the sound seemed to be originating from, and for a few breathless seconds we heard nothing. Then my dad screamed, "Oh fuck," and we heard the sound of gunfire. At this point, my mom shoved my brother and I into the house and closed the door on us. I heard my dad yell, "Are the kids in the house?" The panic in his voice was evident. Once my mom assured him that we were safe, they both came back inside, drew the blinds, locked the doors, and refused to speak about it. Later that night, I was eavesdropping on my parents through the vent in my room, and I heard my dad say to my mom, "I don't know what that was, but I never want to see it again. If the kids ask, tell them it was just someone playing a trick on us." I never asked when I was younger, but once I got older, I've asked him about it on a few occasions. He always refuses to talk about it. After that night, he began drinking heavily. He's thankfully given it up now. Some strange things happened after that, though nothing as major as that noise was, but in retrospect, they all seemed to be building up into some sort of crescendo. My mother walked into the kitchen one night and saw a Native American woman wearing a headdress standing at our back window crying. She was alone in the house with us at the time. I did some research and apparently, the land we lived on was used as a trading ground of some sort before the settlers came. I don't know any more than that. One winter, my mother saw someone looking at her through our bathroom window. It's important to note that our bathroom window was a good 9 feet off of the ground. She got my dad to look outside. Despite the heavy snowfall, there were no footprints leading away from or to the house, but there were a set of footprints in a circle right outside of the bathroom window, again, with no footprints leading to or away from them. During this time, my dad's drinking was increasing exponentially. This seems to be common in those who had experienced things in those woods, as it happened to a friend's father as well. I will tell those stories after I share my own, again, provided there is sufficient interest. We would often hear heavy metal coming from inside of the walls. This happened up until we moved out 15 years later. No one who lived near us listened to heavy metal. My brother, 2 years my junior, began talking about how he would see our dead great-grandpa in our house all the time. I wouldn't give any credence to this due to his age, except for the fact that he apparently described the suit my great-grandpa was buried in detail. He wasn't at the wake or the funeral. My father's drinking culminated in abuse to my mother, and they got divorced when I was 10 or 11 years old. That is the last you will hear of my family problems, though I do feel what I've shared is relevant to the story. My father was the nicest guy in the world before that night. I have to wonder what it was he saw that brought him to that point. After the divorce, my mother bought my brother a dog. It was the sweetest dog in the world. We kept him chained up outside. Every now and then he would break loose, but he would never be gone for more than an hour or two. One day he broke free and did not come back. My brother was understandably heartbroken. My mother promised him a new dog if that one did not come back within a week. A week to the day after that, we found out what happened to the dog. Well, sort of. My brother's screams woke me up that morning. My mother and I walked outside to see what was wrong. Well, it was pretty obvious what was wrong. The skin from the top of the dog's head was laying on our back porch. Just the skin, just from the top of its head. It looked as if someone had ripped it off. The cut was not clean at all. We never did find the body. We buried the skin in the backyard. Once I entered middle school, I made a friend in the grade above me. He lived about a half-mile down the road, so that was very convenient for me. One night, I was over at his house, and he began telling me stories that his brother had told him. Stories about a beast with red eyes that lived in the woods and would get you if you weren't careful. He told me he'd seen it a few times. Once, watching him from the top of a mulberry tree that grew across the road from his house. Once, while walking back from another friend of his house, watching him from the tree line across a cornfield. Again, at the same friend's house, on the roof of his garage. The fourth time he saw it, he said, was right outside of a screen door at his grandpa's house. He said it was crouched down on all fours, like some kind of an animal. The other times had been too far away for him to make out its shape. Apparently it was humanoid, but comprised entirely of darkness and shadow, except for the burning red eyes. I, of course, did not believe him, but I still looked over my shoulder the entire way home. When I got home, I was greeted by my brother sobbing. I told him to calm down and tell me what happened. He told me that he and a friend of his were walking back from another friend's house, which I've marked on the map with an X. It should be noted that this is the same house that my friend claimed to see the beast on top of the garage. My brother said they'd gone down the trail we took through the woods on a daily basis on their way home, but it sounded like someone was following them and keeping pace. He turned around and saw two glowing red eyes set close to the ground. They then rose up to a height of over 9 feet and started coming toward them. My brother ran all the way home, presumably being chased. I've marked the spot where he supposedly encountered it, along with the route that he took home. It should be noted that he ran all that way in the dark. My experience with the beast was to come later. Just to note, this dumbass did not put them up in the story. After hearing about my brother's experience, I had my friend tell me everything he knew about the thing in the woods. He told me the story of his father, who had also seen it. I believe it drove his father crazy, and I also believe that my own father saw it as well, giving the parallels between the two stories. The only difference was that my father and mother divorced, and my father moved away. His father ended up getting shot by his mother due to the abuse his drinking brought about. Being young, 15 to 16, and fearless at this time, I naturally thought it would be a good idea to fuck with the thing, whatever it was, to see what it was made of. This proved to be a mistake. I went into the woods with a dagger, which I thought would protect me, I guess. I don't know what I was thinking. I sat in a clearing until it was dark, when I started to taunt the thing. You know, general stuff that a teenager would say, like, "You're a fucking pussy and I don't believe in you," and "Looks like everyone is afraid of nothing because the only ghost here is a gigantic pussy." I know, I was cool. You guys have not got to tell me. The only problem for me was that what I was doing, it worked. The woods went quiet, quieter than I'd ever heard them. Then, in the distance, I heard the snap, snap, snap of something taking heavy, slow, methodical steps toward me, breaking branches underneath its feet. Snap, snap, snap. I was still brave. I stood my ground. When the sound got to about 30 feet away from me, I heard a tree crash to the ground, followed by the same snap, snap, snap. I started to get nervous at this point. If it could push a tree over, it could seriously fuck me up. The walking started to get faster. Snap, 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 snap. A sense of dread came over me at that point, which I experienced later with my face-to-face encounter. I pissed myself, dropped the dagger, and ran home. Did I mention I was home alone that night? I got inside, slammed the door behind me, locked it, deadbolted it, got a clean change of clothes, and hopped in the shower. While I was showering, the noises started. It was like something with large claws was scratching the side of the house. Sometimes it would hit the house hard enough to shake pictures off of the walls. I put my headphones on and huddled in my room until my mom got home, which is when the noises stopped. I did not tell her anything. The next morning I looked outside, and there were no scratches on the side of the house, nor were there the dents you would expect from something hitting it that hard. I walked out to the clearing I was in and found my dagger buried hilt deep in a tree. I tried pulling it out, but it wouldn't budge. On my last visit to that location, it was no longer there. I never went into the woods at night again. Things were as calm as they ever were after that, though the heavy metal coming from our walls was as loud as ever. By this point, I had begun listening to metal, so it didn't bother me as much as it did the rest of the family. But I digress. I wanted to get to the meat of this section right away. We were at my grandpa's house, the Christmas Eve after my experience in the woods. We left and were driving through a wooded section when my mum caught something in the headlights. Time seemed to slow down when I saw it. It was walking across the road from one wooded area to the next. The whole encounter could not have lasted more than 15 seconds in total but it seemed like 15 minutes, or maybe even longer. It stood at around 9 feet tall. Its body was humanoid in shape, but it was made up entirely of darkness. Tendrils of darkness drifted off of its body when the headlight struck it. I am unsure if that was caused by the headlights, or if it was simply some strange aspect of the beast. Its arms noticeably moved, though in a manner that is hard for me to demonstrate adequately. Its entire range of motion seemed alien and unnatural to me. I was filled with dread. It turned and looked at me, its eyes two glowing coals floating in the physical darkness that was its body. The head turned, but not in the way yours or mine would. It was more as if the eyes shifted. It is very hard to describe. I made eye contact with it for what seemed like an eternity. Then it looked forward and walked back into the woods on the other side of the road. Time slowed down and the sense of dread left me. We all looked at each other with a, "Did you just see that?" look on our faces. We did not speak a word about it until we got home. These days, when I bring it up to my mom, she says it was a raccoon, but the look in her eyes lets me know she remembers, and that is all I want, to know I'm not crazy. I haven't seen it since, though the fear has never left me. We moved away a year after that. I went to college but kept in touch with my friend who lived in the area. He became obsessed with the thing in the woods during that period. He would often go out into the woods at night with nothing but a tape recorder and some candles. I don't know if he ever picked anything up on the tape recorder, and to be honest, I would not want to hear it if he did. The last words he said to me were, "I went out into the woods and promised it my soul if it would give me name of the girl he loved. He got her, but she destroyed him. He is now a broken down junkie who lives day by day eating from trash cans and stealing for a hit of whatever drugs he can get his hands on. He was the smartest person I knew." I've since moved back to an area that's a 10-minute drive away from where these events occurred. I am interested in going back sometime, but not without backup. If I go, I'll post the results on this board. Be me, 13 years old, 12 years ago, before cell phones and internet. I was out wrecking shit on my four-wheeler in backwoods Arkansas, 1 mile near border of Oklahoma, searching for places to sneak out and for parties. Bonfires and booze, fuck yeah. Old logging roads galore, free to explore. About an hour of taking random rights and lefts, I come to a turnaround. No big deal. These are the perfect spots for the party. Jump off my wheeler to check this shit out. Something is different. There are visible trails leading to the woods. They look fresh. I decide to take a peek. Usually there is just a clearing where the loggers parked their trucks while they were in the job. Walk back into the tree line following the trail, and there is one of the creepiest things I've seen in my life. It was a huge altar made out of bones, dried blood all over it. I look down, and there is chunks of bone all over the ground. No fur anywhere, so I don't know what kind of bones they were. What the motherfuck? Keep looking around and there is camouflage nets set up. Walk to the other side of the nets and there are 8 cots with sleeping bags and a fire pit. Shitloads of cans and bags of trash. Nope, nope, nope. Start to feel like someone is watching me. Hear things moving in the trees all around me. I shit my pants and ran to my four-wheeler and hopped on, and drove in 4th gear all the way home. I don't even know how I made it out of there without getting lost. I barely even remember. Told my grandpa what happened. He gets pissed. Tells me to never go over onto that section ever again. I did not argue. Be me. 2nd grade. On a school field trip to a farm. I'm a loser, so I am all by myself. I look over and see a cow. A single cow. I remember it so distinctly, so vividly. The mud on its feet, its slightly smaller than average tail, its white udder, everything. Stare at this cow. It stares back at me. Teacher comes over and asks me what I'm doing. I look at her and tell her I'm looking at the cow. I look back at the cow. The cow is gone, completely vanished, no footprints or anything. My face went. Farmer grew vegetables. My face went. The nearest farm with animals was miles away. My face went. I had apparently been staring at this cow for at least 10 minutes. The thing that creeps me out the most about this experience, even to this day, is the gaze the cow gave. The unending glare of its eyes. I felt like I was transported to another dimension while I was looking at it. I have never had anything like this before the trip, and I have never had anything like it since.